All right, we're gonna get started here. Everyone hear me? All right. Well, I'm Josh Duncan. Welcome to Product Austin. Thank you all for coming. There's a lot of new faces here tonight. So how many times, can I get people to raise hands if this is your first Product Austin? All right, how about that? Well, awesome. Well, real quick, I'm Josh Duncan. We haven't met a lot of you. I am a VP of Product here at a fintech startup in town. There's a couple other organizers if you haven't met. Roger Colvin in the back, so Roger, wave your hand. And then Prabhakar Gopal, he's kind of the mastermind behind Product Austin. So big thanks to Prabhakar for not only helping kind of get this set up and find awesome, really cool speakers, but also big thanks if he helped wrangle the food tonight, or sponsor the food. So thank you, Prabhakar. Really appreciate the stuff. If you follow the hashtag on Product Awesome, in fact, I just actually shared a tweet from this hashtag thanking Prabhakar and plugging. He's got a really cool Craftsman workshop coming up to check out. But if you can give him a thanks online, that'd be awesome. And also, please tweet around or tweet along Product Awesome. We love sharing cool things for everyone to see that can't be here tonight online, and it's a good way to do so. We have an awesome speaker tonight. In fact, we've had a lot of good speakers so far, Product Awesome, but I can say without a doubt, this is the one that I've looked the most forward to. His name is John Tolko. He is the VP of Consumer Design at Blackboard Technology and also the founder of the Austin Center of Design. And more importantly for tonight, he is the author of the book Well Designed. So if you have not read this book yet, it is one, there are a lot of, if you ask a lot of people, in fact, there's a great forum thread on this topic around great books for product people and product managers to read. And one thing you'll quickly realize if you're in product management, that there's no one book. There's lots and lots of books. In fact, that's one of the hardest things about the job is just the sheer number of books and things you need to know. This is by far my favorite product management book, just because it's not about making products. It's about making products that are engaging. It's about making products that people love. It's about making products with soul. So we're really excited to introduce John, so let's give him a round of applause. He's going to talk for a bit. We'll give questions at the end, so please don't hesitate. And if you haven't got your parking validated, you can do that at the back at the end.
But I found this at the pizza box.
Oh,
so
cool.
Somebody lost their parking.
All right, thanks, Jerry. And if you haven't registered the 10 Product Austin, there's an email address up there you can fire, and we'll keep you up to date with other events. So, thanks.
Does anybody have their parking validated? Okay, good. How's everybody doing? Thanks for coming. My name's John. I appreciate the very kind introduction, and thanks for hosting me. I want to talk tonight about products, specifically where great products come from. I spent my life sort of bouncing back and forth between education, consulting, product design, and I think like the rest of you, I've become enamored with sort of wanting to make something that's actually impactful and wonderful. And so the topic of my last book was where do great products come from. And I started by investigating this with a number of different people, and one of the answers I found over and over and over was that it actually takes a ton of vision, that great products are sort of autocratic. Right, they're prescribed by some sort of fearless leader at the top, a Steve Jobs, even if you want. And one example of that comes from Joe Gebbia, the chief product officer at Airbnb, and he said, as a company, we have a vision of where the product is going. We have a North Star, and that's set from the executive team, it's set from the C-suite and pushed down. And he was very clear to say, it's somewhat democratic at sort of the detail level, but the boat's going over there, and if you're not on board, get out of the boat. So that's one perspective. A different perspective, I think, and this is one I prescribe to or subscribe to for a very long time, and actually prescribe to my students, is that it's process. That you can actually method your way through difficult problems. And a quote that I heard as I was conducting some research with Alex Rayner, who's the head of product at Foursquare for a long time, he said, as he was describing how Foursquare came to be, he said, there's not a lot of examples of what we're doing. There's not a lot of examples of taking a product into a startup, into a company, into an organization, because this entire sort of dot-com story is at most 30 years old, just sort of like ramp it all up in a period of 3 years. So he said, look, we don't have a lot to lean on, so we're leaning on process, right? And it's very fragile. Okay, that's another perspective. I think a third perspective, which I increasingly subscribe to, is that it's just hard work. That there is, in fact, no silver bullet. And my friend Mark Phillip, who's in Austin, explained to me that he's the CEO of Are You Watching This? Which if you're a sports fan, you should totally check out. I'm not, and I don't really get it, but it's all sports. like including like little league games and stuff. And all it does is tell you when the game is out of control. So it doesn't matter what sport it is, but if it's like crazy tense, like 3 in the morning, it's a little league game in Japan, and it's like, I want to get out of the couch and watch that. Right? So it'll let you know that. He said he's been doing this by himself for 7 years and 2 months. Pushing the rock uphill. He said he was not profitable for almost, what did he say, 4 of those? Completely bootstrapped. He ran his credit score to 0. There's an anomaly there because they thought he was dead, but for real, this is a real story. He actually bought and got his credit score, it's like 260 or something like that. But he said, I love what I do. I get to watch sports all day and think about math. I mean, that's a pretty good gig. It's hard work, right? He said he was at it over and over and over. And I bet a couple of you guys know him. He's at it all the time, right? It's hard work. I think I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are here at 7 o'clock. It is product management. It's really sort of ethereal. Like, it is process, it is hard work, it is a vision, it is actually a sort of methodology. And I talked to all this crew and a number of other people who I think you recognize some of these faces. They're all people I respect, right? They're people I look up to as, these people know how to make great products. Okay, cool. Let's talk to them about what it is that they know. Like, how did they get to where they are? And what I found was that actually there's sort of a 3-phase story to oversimplify it. A vision occurs. It's established. Sometimes that is, in fact, autocratic push down. It could also come bottom up from the people on the team. And what you're going to see, at least in my work, is that it comes from the community of users in an ethnographic or anthropological sense. So there's a vision that's established. We're going over there. The next sort of story here is that consensus is built around that. And that's a lot of cajoling. Even in a team of 4 or 5, getting everyone aligned is actually probably harder than actually building a product. Even in a team of 2, or maybe especially in a team of 2, that might be true. The last part of this story is surprisingly, although not if you're a product person, shipping it. It seems really silly to say, well, like, oh, and then you actually have to ship the product. We would think that would be automatic or implicit. In fact, that's the hardest part. I was working at Frog Design as a consultant. It's a global innovation firm, and I was a creative director, and I sort of reflected on the numbers. Like, I was there for about 5 years, and I think I shipped 1/10 or 1/8 of the number of products I worked on. So like, that's not a very good track record. Like, it's really friggin' hard to actually get the product out. It just runs into walls. Okay, so we got this simple vision, right? And at the center of it is this really amorphous thing, and it's like, well, what is that thing, right? What is a product? How does it manifest? What does it mean? I'm going to start by talking through it in a very theoretical sense. This is the academic part of the talk. So if you're like a hardcore practitioner, you eat pizza and tune out for 15 minutes. But I think it's important to ground practitioner-driven sort of methods in some sort of basis, because otherwise it's sort of nonsense. I'm not sure you believe it, and it's hard to get other people to believe it. So I'm going to talk sort of philosophically or academically about product, and then get really, really detailed in a case study of my own experience. And the 2 things that I think make up a product fall into product market fit and behavioral insight. Yet for all of the talk about product market fit, no one really knows what it is. So again, I spend a lot of time talking about that with those folks that I showed you before. And I think it's about these things. I think it's first about a broad technological and political infrastructure. And that's not something you think of when you think of the market. Take Google, our example that we love, at least in Austin, because they're building this fiber. And if you're playing along, you would go, well, why on earth does Google, an ad company, need to build fiber optic cable? They're not telecom. Why would they get into that business? Right? And for most of us who eat and breathe pixels and bits, you're like, well, of course, because it's internet. They want to control the platform, right, so that we can consume more internet so they can sell us more ads. Right? Makes a lot of sense. They're building the infrastructure necessary to support their business. Okay? They're literally spending billions of dollars laying fiber optic cable. Okay, now you're a startup, okay? And you're like, well, I require massive infrastructure too. I don't have capital to go run the equivalent of fiber. Maybe I should rethink that as a startup idea. Okay? You can see this play out in a number of different contexts, that you might not have the political clout or the physical infrastructure to actually support your great idea. And so I think the first quality of product market fit is actually recognizing that there exists an infrastructure for your thing to work. Frequently it's technical that holds you back. Increasingly, I'm seeing it actually being policy. I think we're seeing this play out with almost all of the sort of collaborative consumptive models the sharing economy, like the government's kind of perking up and going, oh, what's this Airbnb thing? I sure would like some tax dollars off of that. Right? And so it's starting to actually impede on the innovation that is the company, or so would say a free market advocate, I suppose. Anyway, one of the qualities of product market fit. I think the second one is this idea of social precedent. I was kind of expecting in here to see people wearing Google Glass because this is like nerd central in Austin. And I'm really glad there isn't because that totally creeps me out. But it illustrates for me the point of product market fit. And specifically the idea of a social precedent. Because the reason I think Google Glass is so weird is because we don't actually have a social norm upon which to build. We have a hint of one in glasses, but glasses are not a computer on your face, right? And so it's shocking, it's surprising, it's strange. Although if you take a step back, we do have a little bit of a precedent in a Bluetooth headset, right? That's a computer on your face. And so the introduction of Google Glass now is actually, I think, less strange than it would have been 10 years ago, before we had that little incremental piece of people talking to themselves. Right? Oh, okay, that's socially awkward and weird, and I don't like it, but it eases me into that paradigm, right? And you can back up, through your career and your life of all of the technological advancement you've seen, and they're not leaps and bounds, right? They're incremental. When they catch on, it's almost like, of course it was always like that. Of course we always had these things that you touch with your hands that are these screens everywhere. There needs to be a social precedent, and we ease into it. The last piece of this product market fit is this idea of an opportunity for engagement. This is like the most fuzziest for me to talk about, and it's best to illustrate it, I think, with an example. Give yourself a second and sort of audit what it means to be engaged, and why or how you're engaged right now. Sort of feel it with your body, you think about it with your head. It's emotional, it's also intellectual. It's about attention, right? It's about actually giving me moments of your reflection, your intellect, your curiosity. That's to be engaged, okay? It's gonna take an awful lot to hold that engagement, right? And the same is gonna be true about your products. There needs to be room for that level of personal connection that's happening right now. You want someone to give you their attention. That's the rarest thing they have. Okay, so there needs to be room for that. Again, we're talking very sort of high level, theoretical, in order to set a stage for some really more specific and pragmatic methods. Product market fit is about the big, the sort of broad. On the other side of things, we have this idea of behavioral insights. And the behavioral insights, I suppose that there's a secret sauce to this, although it's not a secret. This is where it's going to come into play. There's three main ideas, I think, around behavioral insights, and the first is value. I don't mean value in the sense of evaluation or in large capital sense. I mean, let's use this as an example again. I think did you guys pay to come here? No? So you have no value expectation, okay, except your time. And that's going to be really different for every single person in the room. Okay? So now you're expectant. I think most of that rests on me, right? There's a value exchange expected of me. Some of that rests on the crew that organized it, right? Maybe I didn't get enough pizza, right? Maybe I couldn't see, I have to stand in the back, okay? But there's a value expectation, and in this case, the product, right, needs to deliver, okay? The behavioral insight is understanding what that value is and recognizing it's different for every single person, okay? All of you value your time differently. If that's our baseline measure, your expectation of goodness for me is gonna be really, really different. And we can find that through some of the contextual research methods I'm going to show. The second piece of this sort of behavioral insight story is identity. All of the folks that I talk to, and in all of my experiences, the products that I think are most successful allow you to reflect your identity back at you in them. Okay? You can actually aspire to be them or hope that they aspire to be you. And the thought exercise that helped me sort of grok this is, imagine for a second your house is on fire and it's burning down. You do the thought exercise, all right, I got the cat, I got the kids, cool. What else do I take? And I did this a couple times, and I arrived at some of my wedding photos that are like physical prints, maybe a couple pieces of art, a couple paintings. That's all I had. And so like take a second and think about it. And all of the things that I wanted to take with me had a sense of identity that reflected back at me. Okay? I could see myself in those items somehow. There's a nostalgia, there's this experience about them. And I think those are increasingly in a world of noise, the stuff that we value. I would think a little bit about the heirloom nature of the items that you might choose to bring out of your house. It's not about technology. I've rarely heard somebody say, I'd get my MacBook, because you don't need the computer, right? You get the stuff on it. Okay, so there's something about actually seeing yourself in the thing, which is about something that's more emotional, I think, than just what it does. It's not about the utility of the object, or the service, or the system, or the product. The last piece of the story on the behavioral insight stuff is the provocation. Without fail, all of the products and people that I talked to, products that I looked at and people that I talked to, had some form of surprise. It was a provocation about culture. It wasn't about the way things are, it was about the way things could be. And sometimes it's subtle. Right? I mean, when I talk to the folks at Airbnb, it's like, that's a incremental change, right? But it's a really dramatically different way of viewing staying in places, hotels, like going visiting. It's a provocation about how culture might be, and it recognizes that it's all made up. Okay? Hotels are made up. We invented them. Cool. Now we have hotels, and that's the way that you stay places. Okay, well, what if you don't? Okay? It's a provocation, and I think when you combine it with all of these other ingredients, you get to some really interesting places, some really sort of emotionally sensitive places, because you're actually challenging how people perceive society. Okay. That's sort of the most academic part of the story. I want to get a little bit to this product management piece because that's the managing of the behavioral insight and this idea of product market fit. Okay, it's how you actually bring the product to market. And I think the notion of a product manager actually has some weird roots. It sort of first existed in the engineering space. I worked at Trilogy in the late 90s, and that was sort of like the mecca of engineering-driven product. Microsoft is that way, Google is that way. And when you have product managers who are engineers, who study computer science, who are very sort of logical and methodical and rational, you're going to get products that are very methodical, logical, and rational. It just makes sense. And most of the product managers that I've met who are engineers are driven by things like efficiency, optimization, feature-rich things, and so consequently you get products that support and sort of embrace those. On the other side of things, we've typically had this view of like brand managers who are product managers in a much more consumer sense. If you look at like Procter & Gamble or J&J, right, they have people who do the same things we do on digital products, but on Tide, right, on detergent, okay? And so they see the world through an eye of a marketer. And maybe they went and got an MBA, or maybe they have a background in sales or advertising. And so when they think about what makes a good product, typically they're thinking about competitive advantage. Right? They're thinking about the way it's presented externally. It's less about maybe what it does and more about how it's visualized in the world. Okay, and so consequently, you end up with things like new, ultra, enhanced, fun size. Right? You have more sort of adjectives that end up enhancing the in the round of the product rather than the product itself. But increasingly, I think we're all starting to recognize that there's like this new form of product management that's driven by design. And by design, I don't mean by aesthetics, and I think that's important to sort of call out. That's a tiny little piece of design, right? By design, I think I mean something that's more focused on people. That if an engineer is going to celebrate and appreciate technology, and a marketer is going to celebrate and sort of appreciate the market or features and competitive landscape, designer is going to appreciate and celebrate people. It's like an advocate for humanity. Okay? So it's an interesting way to think about the world, and increasingly products are starting to require that. And so like it's worth sort of figuring out why, like what's changed. Because this is fairly new. I would say, I mean, in my career, I've probably been doing this 20 years, and this is like four years of this stuff, and it's like really good. Like, oh, I'm a designer, and okay, here, have 100 jobs. Okay, good for us. I think the first place it actually arrived was from Business Week. I don't know if you followed Business Week, but sometime in the late 90s, they started talking about design and equating it to innovation. Like, it wasn't innovation for a long time. Design was about cosmetics. It was do the plastics, right? Skin the nasty-looking piece of electronics. And suddenly, mostly due to Bruce Nussbaum, who was the design editor, it became equated with a strategic differentiator, right? It allowed you to sort of escape the commodity hell that is, driven by price to zero. And in equating the two, even if people didn't understand design, it's like they learned they needed it. Okay, that's good. So they need us, but they don't really understand what it is we do. The other trend that I think drove a lot of this were some of the sort of much more, like, we're talking the affluent of affluent of affluent, attending things like TED, right? These are people that own companies, like heads of KKR, attending things like TED, and being blown over by talks from designers, right? And so then they go back and they talk to their minions and they say, like, this design thing, we need it. Like, you have to have it. And it's, mandated. Okay, so that's why I suppose one way to get a seat at the table. I think actually the last thing that's driving this adoption is actually much simpler. It's this stuff, right? It's the increasing like chaos of our world. And I'll tell you a quick story, which I'm sure is not unique to me. I had to, like, for whatever reason, reset my router at my house, and the SSID changed, and my entire house fell apart. It was like the TV didn't work, and the music didn't work, and the thermostat didn't work, and the security system didn't work, and it was just like, what? I mean, at some point, you're like, wow, I'm living in the Jetsons' future. It's terrible, right? I mean, it's this, right? This was in my hotel room, when I was traveling. And it's like if you could order, a latte off of this thing. Like, the world is strange, right? And it's increasingly stranger, so it feels to us anyway. And designers are really good at making things familiar. They're good at familiarizing technology. That used to be cosmetic. I think it can't be cosmetic if these things are so complicated. So if we look at those sort of three trends, I think we get to a place where designers get to play at that role. And for most designers, typically, they've cut their teeth on this stuff. Right? If you went and got a degree in industrial design or interaction design or graphic design, you would spend your career becoming good at aesthetics, usability, information, hierarchy, composition, cognition, communication. Right? And these are all very tactical things, and designers are really good at making stuff. In a tactical sense, designers are paid as practitioners. It's true in any sort of industry discipline, and you could think about, what's the best salary an individual contributor can make, 5 years out of college, 60K, 70K. Up here, there's this different story going on, right? In the product management world, you talk about things like this. Okay? If you're in the engineering sense, the marketing sense, or the design sense, these are things you care about. These are strategic. Innovation, positioning, engagement. Is it systemic? Does it reflect the aspirations of culture? Okay, and value, right? We talked a little bit about value. These are strategic, and by positioning design as strategic, it gets to play at the big kids table. Right? It gets to eat at the adult table. And that's not a $70,000 job anymore, right? That's a C-suite executive. That's somebody in a VP of product role pulling the shots. Startup, big company. And so most designers sort of like go, how can I bridge the gap? And I think this is true even if you're not a designer, right? If your background is in any of the other related disciplines, engineering, marketing, right? You're probably going, well, I have a whole bunch of tactical skills in my toolbox, right? And I love that. And I'm good at making stuff, and I want to keep doing that. But I really want to play a role in where we're going, not just how we're getting there. Right? But I don't want to lose the craft stuff. Okay, well, I think product management is actually the way you bridge these two gaps. I think it's the way you move between thinking about strategy, thinking about the world in front of you, and thinking about the specific method and detail of how you get there. Maybe you're going like, okay, am I a good product manager? Maybe you already are one and you want a little checklist. Or maybe you're going like, all right, some of this stuff is starting to sound good. Let me give you some observations that some of these guys told me as I was speaking with them. Josh Ellman is at Greylock. I'm sure, if you guys are in startup land, you know who that is, and who Greylock is. And he was an early employee at LinkedIn and all of the big names. And he said, look, to be a product manager, you need to sell, engage, learn, and listen. He said, you need to be a good storyteller. Right? Like, the key to the whole thing for him is the ability to create a narrative. I think what's critical is that the narrative's optimistic, right? It paints a picture of a future that's not now, that is not as bad as now, that is not as hard or slow or difficult or confusing. And you paint a picture of a future that you want to partake in, you want to be a part of. Frank Lyman, who unfortunately passed away, I think about 6 months ago at this point, and was a really good friend of mine. He was my boss for a while. He said, I toggle between my rational brain that says, here's what the competition's doing, here's what the data of my customers want, here's my emotional feelings that this will have an impact, and those things are disjoint, right? And he toggles between them. He says, no one's ever said they want it, no one's ever done it before, but I think it will have an impact. I'm connecting dots. Okay? For Frank, product management was about the ability to sort of connect disparate signals, okay? To put together things that aren't obviously or historically connected. Okay? And I think that's really interesting to sort of view yourself as a signal gatherer, right? Because that means you got to be curious about a lot of different things. It's not just about your industry, right? The signals are going to come from really disparate places. I'm not a NASCAR fan, but that might be where I get really good, sort of innovative new ideas about my product, okay? Extending outside of your worldview. Mark Phillip, the guy that blew out his credit score that we talked about before, he said, the key is to be interested, not interesting. And sort of just as a way of being as a person, that's a really interesting, sort of mantra or way of thinking about yourself. But in a product sense, I think that's really compelling. Gather stuff up, right? Be a sponge. Hear everything. Okay? Judge it later, absolutely judge it, but try to get as much input as possible. I love this story he's told me a couple times. He says one of the ways that he mentors people on how to get good at this is next time like AT&T calls you up or Verizon calls you up, try to keep them on the phone as long as possible. Right? Like get to know them, ask them about their kids, oh, where do you go to college, right? See how long you can extend that conversation. I think that's really fun. So for him, it's a passion for listening to people. Right, an actual passion. You're not forcing yourself like, oh, this guy's talking again. It's like you actually want to know what they have to say. Another idea, Gary Child, a really good friend of mine, he was the GM at Union Square Ventures, it's a VC in New York. And he said, look, the whole thing's about curiosity. He said, if you're curious enough, okay, you will find your way to unexpected places. And for him, it's a curiosity about other disciplines. Right? It's not just like if I'm in the data security space, it's not being really curious about data security. Right? It's about being sort of a generalist in curiosity. I want to know everything. Time consuming to know everything. Right? Somehow you got to start to work that into all of your life, not just the working part. The last piece of this comes from Alex. He says, look, for better or for worse, product is the discipline that sits at the hub of the wheel. Okay? For him, you have neither a carrot nor a stick. You're sitting in the middle of the wheel. You have all the influence you can gather through being charming. Right? And you have to sort of play well with all of these other people. Okay, so for him, it's about affability. To be an affable person, to be somebody people want to be around. Right? And a lot of that is, qualitative, it's fuzzy. It doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert, right? It means maybe you really want to know what other people are thinking or doing or caring about, right? It's not sort of a facade. Okay, so like these seem like pretty good qualities, and when I talk to people about this, they're like, I can do that, right? I'm affable, I can do all these things, cool, sign me up, right? So I think it sort of begs the question, what does a product manager actually do? Like, what does the day-to-day look like? And this is the part where I want to get a little more tactical. I worked at a company called MyEDU, which was a startup here in Austin, and this is MyEDU. MyEDU helped college students succeed in college and get a job. Okay, and we offered a whole suite of free tools to students, like a schedule planner, a degree planner, ways to get jobs, job boards, things like that. And the business model was pretty simple. We sold college recruiters access to reach out to these students, much like LinkedIn, right? And in many ways, it is LinkedIn, because LinkedIn helps you do these things too, but it doesn't do the college part right. This is what our profile looks like. And if you compare it to what a LinkedIn profile looks like, it's really different. If you remember back to when you graduated from college, you didn't have anything to put on your LinkedIn profile, or for many of us, a resume. You hadn't done anything yet, right? And so college students tell us over and over, LinkedIn makes me feel stupid. Right? It says, 2015, graduated. Cool, hire me. So our profile makes you look great no matter what you've done, right? It allows you to emphasize academic accomplishments, not just life accomplishments, because we recognize that students are building their identity, right? They don't have one that they're trying to sell. it's aspirational, and in many contexts, they're trying it on. Okay, so the visual profile allows you to try it on and project a different sense of self to the world. And it's made by aggregating these tiles, again, very much like a resume. I want to walk through a process that we used at my EDU over and over and over. It's a process that looks like this, and I'm going to go through each sort of piece of this story. And I want to walk through it with a specific feature. I want to walk through it with the detail of how that profile came to be. And I think tactically this should give you a sense for the methods that live behind making great products. Okay, so we've sort of set the scene philosophically or academically if you want. I want to get to the nitty gritty. I'm going to start in this world of research. And the type of research we do, and we do it a lot, is qualitative research, and specifically ethnographic research. We go immerse ourselves in the culture of the people that are going to use our products. And in the case of my EDU, that's college students, right? And so we lived with college students. We went to their dorm rooms with their permission, went through their bags, right? They walked us through their houses. We watched them do their homework. We watched them register for classes, right? Like, what does it mean to be a college student? And it's been a while since I was a college student. And I went to a school that had 5,000 students, and UT has 60,000 students. And we went to St. Ed's and here and there. And this is what we saw. And you can first admire her nail polish. I don't know if you can see it there. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what we heard. We talked to a student who said, your resume is like your life. Okay, it's your ticket to the chocolate factory. I like to put customer service and management things and stuff like that on my resume. Everyone has a business degree these days, so I'll always be able to get a job. I found out about international business from a guy at the Gap. I didn't even know what it was. I Googled it, and it sounded better than regular business. So my life decisions are based on stupid things. And Samantha was a 21-year-old international business major. And when I present this, I try to underscore as much as I can that I'm not showing you this to ridicule Samantha. Samantha is the norm. Okay? Samantha is what college students go through now. And the other sort of story that I like to tell in parallel to this is we talked to another student who told us she picked accounting because it was the first major in the drop-down box. Okay? But she's not the anomaly. Okay? The emphasis here is on ethnographic research, which allows us to get intimate details like this that we can then sort of go like, wow, that rocks my world. Right? They're not all like this. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes up when you're watching college students for 4 hours in their dorm room, which is not very interesting. But then you get these little nuggets, and you're like, that's amazing. Okay? And that's the focus of ethnographic research. Let me give you another example. This is a purple squirrel, and it's hanging on the wall in a recruiter's office. And it represents the rarest candidate in the world, right? I need a squirrel, and I need it to be purple, and I need it right now, and they need to work for $30,000 a year. Right? They're looking for a needle in a haystack. That's the way recruiters think about their job. And we talked to a recruiter, we talked to many recruiters, and one of them said, students say, I could do anything. I could do this, I could do that. You couldn't say something worse to a recruiter. Don't apply to 5 of my jobs. You're not going to get any of them. Okay? So she sees these kids who are like, oh, I don't know what I'm good at. There's 5 openings. I'll apply to all 5 of them. Surely I'm good at something, right? And she's like, look, that's a good way to piss me off. You're not getting any of my jobs. Okay, so again, we gain this from spending time with Meg by making a intimate connection with her, by building a rapport and trust, and then starting to understand a little bit more about what it's like to be Meg. And the method here is really, really simple. Okay, it's the simplest thing in the world. You go spend time with people and watch them do their work. Okay, the nuance there is you don't interview them. Right? You don't bring them to you. You go to them and you watch them do their work. Okay, now play it out in your own life. Like, okay, well, I'm making an air traffic controller system. So you want me to go watch an air traffic controller do their job? And like, yeah, the answer is yes. Right? How do I do that? That's the challenge of this. That's why this becomes difficult. You can't just walk into a college student's dorm room. You actually have to form an empathetic bond with them. Okay? They need to trust you. And that's the key, I think, to the whole thing. The notion of observing real behavior, I can't underscore that enough. It's not an interview, right? It's not a retrospective account. So we start with research. The next bit of this is actually the most fun for me because it's the messiest. It's like really amorphous and chaotic. It's the idea of synthesis, which is another way of saying sense making or assigning meaning to data. Okay, and so this is what a sense making or synthesis wall looks like. It's kind of a war room. Let me slide in a little bit here. Each one of these is an utterance from a participant. Okay, so we spend, I don't know, 4 hours with college students on average each, and then we transcribe the whole thing. Okay, so transcription takes about 2 to 4 times as long. Right, if you're a really good typer, it probably takes 8 hours to transcribe a 4-hour interview. And you're like, oh, I could use Mechanical Turk for this, it would be perfect. Right? And then you lose the entire point. Because to this day, I can hear the person, Meg, saying this in my head. I can hear her voice, mostly because I had to play it and rewind it and play it and rewind it and play it and rewind it, right? For 8 hours. Okay? So you talk about wanting to form an empathetic bond with someone. Yeah, I spent a bunch of quality time with her and that was super useful. And then I spent it again and again. I Groundhog Dayed it, right? And so her words are in my head. So we transcribe the whole thing. We put these unique identifiers in the top that have, their name and then a number, and the number is the transcript line number, right? So it's a citation, right? We can go like, where did that idea come? Oh, it came from there, right? And back it out to the transcript. And then we print it. We do a mail merge, right, in Word, because you get them all on like little mailing labels. It's just paper. Cut them all up and put them on the wall. And then we marinate in it. It's on all the walls in the studio, right? It takes about 3 weeks. Everybody participates. It's in your spare time, right? You've got 10 minutes, you're on lunch. You look at a note, look at another note. Well, those are related, and you put them near each other. That's it. And you're steeped in the content from all of this research. Okay? And at the end of this thing, you know the topic, and you feel what the people feel. You have the tacit knowledge in your head now. I am not a recruiter. When I'm done with this process, I am. Doesn't mean I can do their job. Right? But I can feel what they feel on a daily basis. Again, this is my favorite part of the process because it's a mess. You explode the data, and the goal here is to identify groupings and also anomalies. Right? You're looking for those outliers because those are super rich. Right? You're looking for those key quotes, like the one we heard from Samantha, that you're like, whoa, like totally not what I was expecting, not part of my own experience. Like that rocks my entire foundation. That's the stuff you're looking for. This fits into as long as you give it. So if you give it 4 years, you will synthesize the same data for 4 years, right? And so you learn to time box this around basically budget and need. On a 8-week forward project with agile 2-week sprints, you might spend 4 days doing this. On a 12-week consulting gig that's supposed to end in insights and cool vignettes, you might spend 3 weeks doing this. It really depends on what the project is. And so then out of that fall these behavioral insights, okay? And this is the magic, right? If you're following this process, this is inevitable. You're gonna end up with clear, deep, meaningful perception into human behavior. And that's an insight. Let me walk through one. Samantha says, your resume is like your life. It's your golden ticket to the chocolate factory, right? Okay, truer words were never spoken. All you need is a resume. She thinks, if I have bullets on my resume, skill, 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 okay, that says I'm well-rounded. If I have this broad set of abilities, then I can apply to lots of things, and so I will apply to lots of things. That's their like go-to strategy. Okay, so we can draw an insight that says students think they have an idea of what employers want in a candidate, but are often wrong. Okay, that's a massive inferential leap, but it's framed as if it's a global truth. Okay, we just shifted from one totally biased, eccentric data point, right, to an axiom. That's an insight. Let's do another one. Meg says, don't apply to 5 of my jobs, you're not going to get any of them. Okay, so for her, she forms an opinion of a candidate like that, right? Resume, oh, she applied to 3 jobs, you're out. She's looking for really specific things, and she told us she's looking for evidence, right? Not just keywords on a resume. She wants you to prove it, okay? And she creates this really interesting mental narrative of the person. Like, she's never met Samantha, but she already knows that Samantha is like, she has no self-awareness because she applied to 5 jobs, and I don't want her on my team. She would be so disruptive. She would be trying to do everyone's role. She's out. It's like, you looked at that resume for 3 seconds and you got all that about Samantha? Like, that's incredible. And so the insight here is that recruiters make snap judgments directly impacting a candidate's chance of success. And again, we just made a big inferential leap. We have a data point. It was not selected randomly. It is not statistically significant. And we hammered the crap out of it. Right? We built upon it as if it's an axiomatic truth. Okay? Insights are provocative statements about human behavior framed as universal truths, and these are gold. These are things that you can base your entire organization around. So let's show how that might work. The way we get here is we have this big synthesis wall of all these utterances, blurbs, quotes, and things like that. We've grouped them. And then we can start to provoke questions. We say, why? We see a grouping of little notes, quotes that have been moved around, all about education, and all of them are pointed to this fact that students feel overwhelmed. Why? You can ask the question, why? Well, some of the answer is going to come from the data. Some of it's we're just going to make up. I don't know, why does Samantha do what she does? Can I tell a credible story about that? It might not be an accurate story, but it's credible, right? And so we just hammer why, and then we force ourselves to answer it. Answer each why question, instead of just leaving that, I don't know, not enough data, can't move forward. No, you gotta move forward. Answer each why question. And then you can start to make these inferential leaps, right? Finally, you frame sort of everything you've come to as if it's true, even though you recognize in the back of your head, not. To put a really fine point on it, this is where innovation risk happens, right? We're about to get to an innovation, and we just interjected risk by making an inferential leap. And the bigger the leap, probably the bigger the risk, sort of market affairs aside. So let's get into the next sort of story here around, okay, cool, we got these insights. We're starting down a path of this provocation. Let's actually get more closely aligned to a product, right? And for that, we're going to get to a value proposition. Remember, we got our insights. Student insight, employer insight, okay? And let's sort of reconnect this. If this is our student, they're thinking like, I don't know about skills. I don't even know if I have any skills. One of the stories I like to tell is we were doing some research with a junior at community college who was studying advertising. Junior? Sophomore? I don't know. She was far along. She wasn't a freshman. Right? And she showed us her portfolio, and we walked through her work. And then we said, so what are some of the skills you have? She, I don't have any skills. Like, well, where did all this work come from? She said, that's just the work we did in class. I don't have any skills, I'm still learning that. So her understanding of herself and the identity she had built and her abilities, like really, really strange, right? Really out of whack with the way that I would perceive it. So students are like, I'm not even sure I have skills. They're thinking it's important to be a generalist, right? It's important to be sort of open to anything. I need to have like a broad perspective, okay? They're thinking, I don't really understand the hiring process, total black box, right? It's like, I don't know what's going on in there. And above all, the key to getting a job is a resume and a cover letter. Because the career service office at every university in the United States says, if you have a resume and a cover letter, you are set. And any hiring manager in here will tell you, like insignificant, no interest in a resume or cover letter, right? Like, let me meet you and see your work. So totally misguided. Okay, so that's our student story. And on the recruiter side, something similar is going on. A recruiter here says, I'm looking to match a really specific skill profile. I have one job and I'm looking for a purple squirrel, right, to fill it. And I need to see evidence you can do things. I don't believe you, right? I'm starting from a place where lists on a resume, don't believe it. I need to actually see an illustration of this. This recruiter is going to build a story about you based on the smallest details possible, right? Flip judgment, really quick. And by the way, they're very busy. Very busy. So we end up with these insights, and we arrive at a what-if opportunity. Okay, and for us at MyEDU, the what-if opportunity was, what if we help students identify their skills and present them to employers in a credible way? Okay, so follow the trail. We did a bunch of ethnographic research. We synthesized it, right? We identified patterns. We identified anomalies. We provoked why, and extracted these insights as provocations. And we arrived at this place where there's an opportunity to make things better. And if you recast this as a value story, we end up with a value proposition, right? We say it as a fact. We assert that MyEDU helps students identify their skills and present them to employers in a credible way. And when we assert it, we make it a promise. So now we're saying, we promise if you use our product, we will do these things. That's pretty clear. Now we have to do those things, right? Because if you promise something and you don't actually deliver, you have very unhappy customers and you don't have them for long. And so we just twisted the entire process into a value proposition, and from here, it's gonna get a lot easier because now we've contained a problem space, right? We've gone from really amorphous, open-ended, ambiguous, just research with college students to a place where we have a box around what we need to do. We need to do that. Really clear. There's all sorts of things we could do that don't do that, but we need to do things that do that. Okay? And the way we got there was telling stories. We tell stories of the problem state, and then we provoke these what-if situations. Okay? We told stories about Samantha and people declaring majors based on arbitrary things, and students being really sort of anxious, and recruiters making these quick judgments. We'd ask questions to ourselves and the team and answer them. Right? And we arrive at this place of a new capability statement. And then we flip it around. So we ask the what-if question, and then we make it a statement. And now it sort of becomes somewhat simplistic product development. Right? Now we're going to define features. Okay, so now we're going to start to go like, what are the capabilities that support that? We came up with a bunch of capabilities. We said, well, the students need to be able to add skill to their profile, right? To this idea, this manifestation of them. There's a bunch of ways to add skills. You can browse for them, you can search for them, you can look at a faceted list, blah, 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 right? Maybe they could substantiate their skills. Recruiters want you to prove that you're good at something. Well, maybe like your teacher could say, yeah, he's good at that, he was in my class, right? Or you had an employer, the employer could say, yeah, she's fantastic. She showed up for work on time, did great work. They can endorse you. And then you display the skill on your profile, right? Pretty straightforward sort of list of features or capabilities you might come up with now that the problem is so constrained. And like any startup, we didn't have the ability to do all of them. So we picked sort of the critical path. We said, all right, if we can do this, we can actually follow through on that value promise we just made. So we did this. And then it gets stuff that we know and love, right? You enter a bunch of user stories in Jira. Now we're at like the basic table stakes of building products. This is not necessarily innovative work. It's the hard slog of actually getting a product to the door. Stories, right? Creating comps, letting the designer do their thing, visuals, really sort of understanding the details. And the way we get here, which is I don't think that unique, is once we have that value story, we're going to craft narratives of what we call hero flows around how people would use our product to actually achieve that value, okay, to attain that value. The hero flows are not the edge cases, they're not eccentricity. It's like, what's the 80% case to get from here to there so the value is delivered, so the value is achieved. Okay. From there we launch, right? Yay, the product gets out the door, okay? And again, hardest thing in the world. Like, why is it so hard to get a product out the door? Eventually we got to a place where we were launching 2 or 3 times a day. When we started, it was like pulling teeth. Like, get this thing out, right? So we launch. And we wanted to know what was happening, and so we baked into the profile a daily email. And this, what you're seeing, I get every day. It's been broken the last 3 days, and it says zeros, and it's driving me crazy because some Python script somewhere broke, and nobody knows how to fix it. But when it works, you get detail like this. And so we were able to track profiles, member usage. We had things like skills per profile, right? Because if skills are the things you want students to add, so recruiters can search against them, how many skills you have on average per profile becomes meaningful, right? And so this gives us visibility into what's going on. I think that the sort of takeaway here in the metrics place is to give yourself visualizations that can actually indicate what's happening. And what you're seeing here is the breakdown of the skills that students added to their profile. And this is like my favorite slide in the whole presentation. Take a second and just absorb the things the future leaders of the United States are learning. Okay. So, at scale we had 1 million something users, so like, great, we're all learning the Microsoft suite. Apparently we're learning leadership too, which is really good. The lead training in the Microsoft suite. This is a breakdown of the skills, right? So we get the daily report, we start to get visualizations and analytics, but you can track anything. too much data, you're awash in data. So we tried to identify when we launched the feature what it is we wanted to track. And in this case, it was number of skills and what the actual skills were. Okay, so the way we got here is prior to launch, identify the usage behavior that you're going to care about. Because again, if you have ComScore or Google Analytics, it's like, there's too much. Too much to track. No idea what's going on. So if you can come to 1 or 2 key metrics, then it becomes really, really easy to extract those or to build a tool around giving you those proactively. Like in our case, the data email. Moving from there, it sort of gets to this like rinse, repeat kind of thing. We go through iterations. Remember we said we didn't have enough resources to do everything? All right, well, let's add something in, right? Next we said, what if you can add skills to the profile based on like other things, like collaborative filtering, for example. He said he learned this, did you learn this too, right? And so we have, at the end of each semester, a form that we send to students, and we have, some million number of students. I think at this point we have 1.4 million students that get this thing about their unique classes, right? And it was just a form, like would you recommend them? Was their teaching style, did you have to go to class or not? Were there a lot of tests? Were they hard? Things like that. And at the end, we appended a new question. We said, well, what skills did you learn in the course? Okay, so instead of the students declaring, I know advertising, they said, well, in Dr. Fitzpatrick's regression models class, what skills did you learn? Okay, so we tried to actually intercept the student at a different place where it made more sense. We also sort of refined in this iterative sense, what the actual UI work is, like really getting into the nitty gritty if we want to increase like, well, why aren't people using skills? Well, okay, this is why. Maybe it's convoluted input process. Oh, well, can we have a pick from a normalized list? Well, what if they add something that isn't in the normalized list? Blah, 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 right? You work through all the details there. Again, it's the heavy lifting or long slog, however you want to call it, of product. And we sort of iterated on it too, right? We said, well, maybe if you learned a skill, and this is what a student sees when they say that they learned, in this case, drawing, you could associate it with a course or a project or a work experience, right? And tie it to one of those elements as a way of substantiating that you know it. I did this project for my senior project. I had to code in C++. I know C++, and here's the evidence I made a thing, right? It's related to an actual artifact. And this is what it looked like at that point when you added these things, right? It would say you're showcasing the skill with this project. In this case, it could be a Vimeo link or something like that. You have work experiences, and again, if you had classes here, it would show up here as well. So we're iterating through the content, right? In some cases, the stuff we're doing is tiny, right? We were doing usability testing when we ran into that advertising girl who was like, I don't have any skills. Because, all right, at the very least, we can add a helper, like, oh, this is what we mean by skills, right? And so in many cases, this iterative process isn't about massive changes to the product. It's like little itty-bitty details, right? We did the heavy lifting at the concept stage, the big innovation, the big rocks, the insights, and now we're at like the micro level, the tiny stuff. One of the things that we thought was pretty cool is when you added a skill, like you could add anything. If it wasn't in our normalized list, you could still add it, and you got it on a gray tile, right? It's just raw HTML text on top of a template, and we scale the text based on how big the string is. But we decided that since we're getting such a trend of like, I know Microsoft Office or whatever, maybe we could make something special happen if you inputted a skill that other people knew. So we let the designers sort of go crazy one day, and they came up with custom tiles for some of the skills, that were, more prevalent. So like if you entered dance, instead of getting the gray tile, you'd get a pink tile with some dance moves on it, right? So starting to add in little bits of detail into places that we know are somewhat problematic or troublesome, or we know that are places where we want students to really experience joy and delight, so they stay there. So the story here is, I think, easy. You make hypotheses based on usage data. You're often wrong. And then you increment the product, right? I think if most of y'all are working in product organizations, like this is the stuff you already know how to do. You make stuff. So then the final piece of this story is like, how do you communicate that you made a thing, right? What's the communication strategy so people actually know to go get it? I want to show you an example of one that didn't work. When we rolled out the skill story on Profile, we were like, oh, well, we have this awesome collaborative filtering idea. We know a ton of students and a ton of their schedules and a ton of historic data. So if you took a class in UV Vis spectrometry, and John S. took a class in UV Vis, whatever it's called, and said he learned a particular skill, we get into it that maybe you learned that skill too. You were in the same class, right? If he said he learned it, you probably said you learned it. So we sent people this email, and you click the thing, and it would go like, oh, okay, add it to your profile, and also make the link, the suggestive link, even stronger. Right? So we tried it. We didn't want to, spam 1,000,000-something students with it, so we tried it with a small group. We tried it with 2,158 people, and this is an apology email from the PA being like, here's why it didn't work. And actually, there's no here's why it didn't work. This is more saying it didn't work. The why is a question mark. We sent it to 2,000 people, 414 people opened it, 50 people clicked on it, right? Inconsequential numbers or click-through rate on this thing. And so now, okay, you're the product manager. This is your communication strategy. You're like, wonder why it didn't work. And actually, I don't know the answer. I have a whole lot of thoughts, but you never actually get to know, right? That's what happens when you're working at a scale of some magnitude, is like you can guess, but you're not going to know for sure. And so the method here, I think, is to actually identify how you want to communicate and give yourself a measure to understand if it worked or not. Give yourself a way to track that. And do a small test, right? I'm not a big fan of the test and measure stuff, but this is a place where it makes total sense, particularly if you have a lot of people. The last piece of the story is community feedback. I try to get anything that the user touches in my email, anything. And so in this case, this is a support ticket. This is Zendesk. I'm sure many of you use it for help and support. I get every email that comes through it. It's weird for a VP to want to do that. I don't actually think it should be. For a while, I was the face of customer service at my IBU when we were a 20-person company, which is a little weird because I'm not that patient with anyone. And in this case, the ticket says, where can I see a list of what skills have their own dedicated images? You remember the skills if you type in piano or dance, you got dance or piano. This user was like, okay, those are cool. Give me the list of all of them. He said, I'm OCD like that. I found 5 on my own. Surely there are more. So, and this is me. I have my customer service hat on. Honestly, it says 107. It was probably 3:30 in the morning because I would wake up and do these things. Like I would just answer support tickets, whatever. So I said, thanks for writing. We like the magic of the surprise. You'll have to discover the other ones. And then I put a winky face. And he said, bad. I'm unsatisfied. He rated the ticket as bad. He said, that's not a very good policy. So anyway, I try to get every single piece of touch point with the user. Somehow I get visibility into it. This gives me another piece of data. We talked about Frank's perspective on gathering signals, remember, before, as sort of a key thing that you like to do as part of being a product manager. This is a signal to how my product's doing. It doesn't mean I have to listen to it, right? I don't have to follow this feedback. It's just another thing that I integrate into my worldview of how the product is doing. In this case, we didn't change it. We were like, nope, sorry, man, not giving you a list, and we're not changing the product. And so the story here is actually really, really simple. Just make sure that all communication from users comes to you. What that means is that your workload just got a lot higher. Right? It doesn't mean you have to respond to them all. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but somebody, I've heard a lot that Steve Jobs checked his own email all the time and would respond to anybody all the way through his career. Again, not sure if it's true or not, and I can't imagine the volume there, but I try to make sure that I get anything, and this is like, support tickets. I try to get Jenkins reports, like anything that's happening on the product, I want to know about, even if I don't understand them. So there's an end to the story, I suppose. We were acquired by Blackboard in December of 2012. Blackboard is the 10,000-pound gorilla in the education space. I'm sure all of you have encountered it at some point. I encountered it when I was in grad school 15 years ago, and I would say it hasn't changed much.
Who's the product manager at Blackboard?
There are a number, and part of the story, actually, and why I'm still there, is the SVP of product is new, as of a year ago. The entire organization was there probably for 12, 13 years. A lot of people were lifers. And there was a complete churn and reorg about 4 months before they bought my IDU. And they brought in a really talented group of people who understand consumer software. They were almost all at Autodesk. They acquired us, and they acquired us for a couple of reasons. One was a little bit of an acqui-hire. I think another was the profile product. And a third was it signals to the world that Blackboard is shifting from being an enterprise software company that sells software to CIOs of large school systems to a consumer product company. And that is not a shift that a 2,000 person company does overnight. And so I am now in the heart of that shift. I can talk a little bit about that if you're curious in Q&A, but my point here is that there's an interesting thing that happens when the 10,000 pound gorilla eats your startup. This is profile acquisition on the bottom is the blue line, pre-acquisition for a year of MyEDU. And it's important to see a year because we have seasons, right? When everybody goes back to school, we see a peak and then everybody goes away and we see a valley. We were averaging, call it 2,400 new profiles a day, new students signing up a day. This was the back to school season at Blackboard when it was integrated into Blackboard's product. 18,000 new student signups a day, sustained for a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that, right? It puts your entire company on steroids. And so I, who love to get all of the email from all of the students and all of the sport tickets and all of the touch points, it's just like you're getting blown over by a fire hose, right? And it dramatically, I think, changes the way you think about product enhancements, right? We would test, some we wouldn't even test. We'd just be like, oh, this is cool, we throw it out there. And now it starts to really make me scratch my head. It's hard to tell how many users use Blackboard, but our number is right around 27, 28 million students. And so like now I'm going, all right, each decision matters, like a lot. I think it's sort of an interesting, quasi-end to the story here. But in the middle of all of this stuff is product. And so we talked a little bit about this process of moving from a vision to consensus to shipping. We talked about it theoretically, and I tried to give you sort of a mini case study that has some discrete and specific methods in it. And most people, by the time they get here, they're like, all right, that sounds awesome. I want to do that. And when I was reflecting again on the people I spoke with, what they had to say about it, it was really consistent. Joe Gebbia said, throw yourself into an experience of making. Okay? Coding, design, whatever it is, learn it and make something. Leland Riches, who is the head of product at Kickstarter, said, you have to have some experience in building something. Okay? And Gary Chow said, go make something. Okay? Seems like a pretty straightforward, consistent, and very direct answer. Go make something. The best way to actually move into this product role is to follow something of the process I showed you, or some other process, and make an artifact. We talked about product market fit, and that can sort of guide. I think, again, at a high level, if your product's going to be somewhat successful in terms of adoption. We talked about behavioral insight, which might be a guide for if the product's going to be successful emotionally and engaging. And ultimately, it's about shipping. Right? The whole key to the entire process is getting the product out the door. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time and attention. Time for questions.
Yeah. So I think we're going to just raise your hand. I'll let John call you. We're a couple minutes here for questions. There's still some pizza back here, so feel free to grab some in the meantime.
Just on the front.
No, actually, one thing. We do have the door prize, so if you have a copy of the book that we're going to give, we're going to pick one of the best questions and give you a copy of the book. So please ask questions.
The best question? Okay.
Statistically measured.
No pressure, man.
All right, back to the research time. When you were in the dorm room, you talked about transcribing. Does that mean that you were recording people?
Yeah, so the question is around transcription. And a little bit more on the mechanics. We go into the dorm room, right? And we go through an entire sort of protocol about what's going to happen. First, we have the student sign a consent form. And the consent form says a couple things. One, it says, you consent to us recording you. We explicitly say we're going to share this in our organization. We're not going to share it outside of the organization without changing your name, blurring out your image, removing unique identifiers. So Samantha is not Samantha, it's somebody else. They sign that, and then we work very quickly to establish rapport. And so we do a lot of not utilitarian conversation stuff. Oh, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Oh, that's so funny. I'm from that, like that type of thing. And the intent is actually to form a very quick emotional bond, which means that the people who are good at this are good at this in real life too. You can't really fake this. Right. We try to set the person at ease by only having 1 or 2 people there. Gender match is usually a big deal. Age match, we try to do something around that. And then once we're there, we try to transition as quickly to activities as we can. Ideally, you're watching them do their work or their job or their play. It's hard to say, okay, now I want you to watch TV, and I'm going to watch you watch TV. So sometimes we'll do stuff like, okay, well, I'm going to be a fly on the wall, just go about your business. That's totally awkward. It doesn't really work that well, except in like a busy work environment. Instead, we try to start activity with a game or an activity. Start motion and behavior with a game or an activity. And so with some of these, we did an academic timeline. We brought a piece of paper and we put a dot over here and said, okay, well, we want you to walk you through your earliest educational memory to your most recent. Right? And as they go through it, they might say something like, oh, well, here my mom entered me in the spelling bee. Oh, tell me about your mom. Oh, do you have a picture of her? Oh, can we see where you keep your pictures? Oh, they're in your bedroom, underneath your bed in a shoebox. What else is in the shoebox? Right? It's an entree into actual activity, into probes, into prompts, and into the culture of the person. So that's a long answer to yes. We record them so that we can transcribe the whole thing. We don't video record because it's a pain in the ass. Well, you don't want somebody doing this. It's really hard to open up. And also then you have to watch video. When it's audio, you can put like a Windows Media Player kind of thing on half speed. And you can have hotkeys to stop as you're typing. Yeah.
So you brought up culture. You have to be aware of the culture. And like, well, we have a new interface that we're putting across everything. How do we identify culture with that?
Yeah, I think it's about being really, really specific about the people that are going to use it. I don't believe the everyone's my user story. When you get to Google size, everyone's your user. But none of us would be sitting in the room when we were running product at Google size. We'd be busy running product. I think actually you have to be really, really specific about who it is you're trying to support. And once you know that, then it becomes really, really clear about what the cultural, experience is like. It doesn't necessarily have to be generalizable, though. I think the key, or one of the keys to a lot of this, is I'm not looking for quant data, right? I don't care that I'm unsure. In fact, I'm embracing, in some respects, that I'm unsure. I believe I'm trajectorially accurate. I don't believe that I'm so far off course that I'm going to build a chair when what everybody needed is a car. Okay? But I might get the color of the car wrong. Not a big deal. Again, it's not fail-safe, right? You're introducing risk through this inference, and so you could be completely off base. The more of sort of an empathetic bond you have with a person, the more likely you are to be right. I don't think you can have empathy with a group. Like, you have empathy with a person. Actually, I'm not even sure you have empathy, because to have empathy, it means you become them. Like, that's 100% empathetic, right? But we can get close to a person. And there's ways to get close to a person. I don't know about how you get close to this ambiguous, amorphous, like marketing-driven segment. So we try to go as specific as possible. Yeah.
I loved that, but that was awesome.
Thanks.
I just had a question. So you were talking about when you moved from the startup phase to getting acquired, and how you see this astounding spike. For my work with similar process that we're going through right now, I'm really trying to make the argument that we need to triple down on instrumentation to get a better sense of what folks are doing, because my inbox can't handle it either. Same mentality as you know. What are things that you are trying to do to monitor those things so that you can effectively understand the value of the features that you want to contribute, say in the next 3 months, but then things that you may amortize over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. We didn't do a very good job of it when we first integrated, mostly because the tech stacks didn't align. My EDU was on Twig, and I don't know, it had grown over however long it had existed. It wasn't on, there's no Angular. On the back end, it's like totally jacked up different. I think one of them was Java or something, I don't know. And so all of our sort of Comscore-driven analytics went aside. We still have Google Analytics, that doesn't give you instrumentation at all. And so once we integrated, we had broad values like this. We had really specific values on stuff we cared about. And I think maybe an abstract answer, or a specific answer to that abstract rambling into your very specific question is find one metric to target. We ended up targeting tiles per profile. Right? So you have this profile and you can add a bunch of tiles. And our thought was the more tiles the student adds, the more engaging our product is for them, the more time they're spending with it, more value they're potentially seeing in it, and the more likely it is, again abstractly, to lead to them getting a job. because it means that when employers are mining through students, or we're proactively sending it, there's more facets to search against. Anybody with more facets is going to drop to the top automatically. So that became our sort of live or die metric. That's the metric we went to the board with, right? We were funded by Bain, partially in each board meeting, in addition to everything else you want to talk about. Oh, here's our tiles per profile number, and here's the graph behind it. So I guess an answer might be, if you can identify like a 1 or 2 thing you care about, you don't actually need really good instrumentation across the board, and so it's a lot less expensive, I guess, maybe. Depends on how messed up your tech stack is. Yeah?
Great talk.
Thank you.
Office 370 I've been through 2 other companies where it's very hard to build a value proposition. I'm just curious what your experience was. I'm sure that was not the first one that came about. You must have gone through multiple iterations.
Yeah.
How did you look at what both sides of the customers and users, and how did you bring about the value proposition?
Yeah, that's a great question too. We did get it wrong. I joined them right when they were pivoting to right when MyEdu was pivoting to the profile story, to the recruiters as an employer. They had tried ad sales, Target ads for ramen to college students. They had tried selling reviews and recommendations. In fact, MyEdu grew out of Pick-a-Prof, which if you went to UT was sort of a thing there. Same founders. So they had tried various value propositions. I think the reason that we got one that stuck is actually that it was grounded in more qualitative emotional pillars. It wasn't driven by a hope for scale, a hope for money, a hope for any of the externalities that we all care about. It was actually focused more on solving a emotional pain point, not a utility pain point.
But did you try 1 or 2 of them, or did you just come up to this one thing and then grow the whole company?
No, it's never that succinct, right? Okay. I mean, it's this amorphous mess over time. Yeah, it's easy for me to put it into 14 slides of and then we did this, and then we did that, and then we did this. But broadly, we've played. This is a playbook. When I was at Frog, this is what we did. Right? It didn't occur to me until I was at a startup. But I've done this with AT&T, I've done it with Disney, with HP, with Microsoft. It becomes a very sort of dependable way of getting to a value story, because you're finding out latent emotional needs that real people actually have, right? That's why the behavioral research becomes sort of that fundamental. Yeah.
So let's say, purely hypothetically, of course, that you're an individual contributor, you're working with a product owner who isn't necessarily as passionate or open to ambiguity or has experience making that sort of stuff. I mean, what sort of advice would you have to the ICs for managing up? And again, I'm not saying that happens ever.
Right. Particularly not in your case. In case your boss is in the room. That would be a good way of managing up. You invite your boss to a talk like this and you ask that question. I think the key to any of this stuff is when it's untested, you've got to do a small bit and you've got to kick it out of the park. Right? So you take on a tiny little thing, you do some design research, you do it on your own time, right? Probably you're working 60 hours instead of 58 hours or whatever, and then you present a win. And then somebody goes, oh, that was really cool, how'd you do that? And you're like, well, if I had 5 hours a week, I could do more of that. Oh, if I had 50 grand in budget, I could do even more of that. That's typically the way that we've driven ourselves into organizations through a consulting story, right? You get one product, you don't go in and be like, I want to be agency of record. It's like, actually you get one product, or one project, you probably go way over budget, you kill your burn, and then you deliver something awesome, knowing that you're socializing into the organization that there's money and other people that want that stuff. I think the same is true in your own organization. Sure.
An extension of that, you've outlined a fairly complex, very sophisticated model. It's all wonderful stuff. If you were to, you've mentioned a few times, just pick something and make it, right? Do you have any advice as to which ones have a better chance of success or easier to do, or what would you choose to start with if you wanted to try and encourage that in your organization?
Yeah, I think it has to be tied to the person that's going to use it. Like if there's a vetting criteria, it's around how valuable is it for the user, not how easy is it for me, how cheap is it, how fast is it. I wouldn't say it's a hard fast rule, right? There probably aren't any. It's a heuristic, but if there's a heuristic that I lean on, it's that one. Which means that when I'm looking at the 10,000 things I have to do and going, oh, I can only do 3, like that's how I'm going to choose which 3 to work on. That's a really polarizing viewpoint in many organizations. I found it to be true in Blackboard. I mean, they're very, very open now to design because they understand the connection between all of the stuff I showed you and becoming a consumer-centric, student-focused, learner type of company. You can't just build enterprise software. You have to get it emotionally. But I think it took watching your industry sort of fall apart in front of you to get there. So in many organizations that are losing, it's a lot easier to evangelize this process of user-focused. So anyway, I think my answer, at least for me, is the criterion is, does it emotionally help the person I'm trying to help? The users. People buy it. Not necessarily the same thing. Yeah.
So you said that the metric that you guys went by was tiles per user.
Right.
And that was what you guys based everything on. Now you also said that recruiters, in the axiom was that they wanted less, they wanted somebody who was more of a specialist.
Right.
And how did that metric sit with recruiters? And kind of like a second part to that is, if it did sit with recruiters, well, was there a specific tipping point, almost like how Facebook says they have 14 friends in the first week or 2 weeks? Like that's.
And then you got them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Twitter had one too. Like once you had your 7th follower you're in or something like that. Well, it didn't sit with recruiters at all because we didn't tell them. That was an internal metric. So we never told. Our value story was not you can search across all these facets. It was much more directed to things like don't have to go to career fairs anymore. Find the purple squirrel. Find alma mater for your CEO. That was a big one, right? Oh, the CEO of a Fortune 100 company wants to only hire from this university. Okay, cool. Only show me students from this university. Great, now I can do my college recruiting. The tipping point thing, I'm not sure what the answer is. We had a really trying time isolating profile because, like everyone else, we had legacy products. And our biggest legacy product is a schedule planner. It's free, and students love it. And it's actually hilarious because all it does is allow you to see your schedule on a grid. Like,
I love it.
Like, holy shit, it's on a grid. It's amazing. I can see my classes. It's like there's a free business idea, right? And so we had trouble discerning traffic that was coming for schedule planner. And oh, by the way, we discovered the profile. And traffic coming from the profile. And oh, by the way, we're using the schedule planner. And so it wasn't a tiles per profile. That wasn't as clear as saying like, oh, here's our tipping point. Here's where we know we're succeeding. I would say once the student started engaging in the profile at all, it became sort of a all or nothing kind of thing. Like our tiles are not all about skills. We have like hometown is a tile. You can add your clubs and organizations. So they're not all about jobs, in which case you're not, because students haven't had a lot of internships, and they're not all about projects, which means that you can have a lot of tiles and still be funnelable for a recruiter. So I don't know, that's a convoluted answer. I don't know if it really answered the question. All right, cool.
I have to think about how to formulate this question.
Okay.
Can you think of an example where this framework has worked in an environment where the metric of success, which in my B2B world would be a purchase order, is dependent upon not just one person, but the decision is, it's a consensus among different people from different departments that have different fears. Is there an example of this in that sort of an environment?
I can't think of an example of a case, but I can tell you a story around a method, which is, it sounds like one of the things that we've run into a lot in consulting stories around visualizing power conflicts, power struggles. And I don't know if power dynamics is exactly what you're getting at, but there's something, okay.
It is.
There's something called contextual design work modeling, which is a way of slicing through, that's just the name of a book and a method. It's a way of slicing through ethnographic research like you saw here in order to isolate sequence of actions, the physical environment in which actions are done, the flow of information, and oh, by the way, the culture in which information flows. And that cultural model becomes a visualization of who has the power, who wants the power, and where the breakdowns are between constituents. That's a form of this empathetic story right? This whole like product by design instead of by engineering or marketing. And I think abstractly what I'm saying is you need to visualize it. Because when you visualize something, you make it real, right? And so if you can visualize the amorphous, often hidden, underpinnings of all of these organizations having to play well together, you're going to provoke some sort of response. It will bring it to a head, and then you can actually address it or product around it. Bringing it to a head is not always good, right? And in many cases, when you visualize an organization, particularly for an executive, and then they go like, what are you saying? Like, either my little bubble's too small or my little bubble's too big. Are you saying that I'm a tiger, or are you saying that I'm like a Eeyore or something like that, right? So when you start to visualize those roles, like you gotta. Another way of saying this, and I say to my students all the time, is that design is always political, right? And so you're always going to have a political response to the thing you make. But I think the big takeaway, I suppose, from that sort of thread is draw something, right? Like make something that visualizes the situation you're in, even if it seems unrelated or not specifically in the product.
Just sort of to continue the question, how do you resolve tension between economic buyer and end user? So particularly kind of in enterprise space, executive wants a million features, end user has a very task focused.
It's a great question. I'm in it right now. I'm in it, right? I mean, Blackboard sells features to CIOs, right? Like that's what we do. We have something like 18,000 features in Blackboard Learn, which is our core product. It's a massively successful business. Company called Instructure has some features that are similar, and oh, by the way, is easier to use. Less features, better experience, right? Oh, okay. The company says, we're totally on board. Consumer, now it needs to be easy to use, empathetic, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, we have a book of business that was created by selling features to CIOs. And you can't screw that up. I'm in it, right? So the answer is you got to serve both masters. We're supporting contracts that run for the next 10 years. Like you can't sunset products that are feature rich, or we can't anyways. We have to sort of build on both stories at once. And I think that's actually when you talk about pivoting a Titanic, what is it, moving the deck chairs on the Titanic is often the illusion used for moving a large corporation. It's because you have to do all the stuff you were doing and you have to do the new stuff too. It's the innovator's dilemma, right? Yeah. It's like it embodied. So I don't know, it's not an easy answer. It's like you gotta do both. You gotta do well. Am I being pushed on stage?
No, you're doing great, but thanks for all your questions. Great questions, as a matter of fact. And I think you can probably, maybe if John will stick around a little bit,
I got about 15 minutes.
You can continue to ask him questions individually. But for now, let's thank John.
Thank you.
And John, you're going to be at South by Southwest, right?
Yeah.
What will you be talking about?
It's going to be a similar talk to this, I think. I haven't gotten my head in the game yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very related topic. Okay. I'm sort of on the extended book tour. The slow book tour.
And on that note, you be thinking about the question that you liked the most.
Okay.
And we'll, in a few minutes, we'll award the book, a copy of the book. I also wanted to make sure that we thanked our sponsor tonight, and that's Prabhakar on the left corner there. In case you don't know, he runs a workshop, a 2-day workshop called Craftsman PM. And he's running it actually this month. He's going to do it this month, February 21st and February 22nd. And you can check it out and sign up for it at craftsmanpm.com. So beyond that, our next Product Austin meeting is going to be in March, I think March 10th. And the speaker will be Nur Ayal. He's another sort of famous author, a noteworthy author. And I believe the book is called Hooked. And does anybody know the remainder of the name? How to form habit-forming products. Correct. And we're going to be switching from our Thursdays to Tuesdays for the remainder of the year, and we'll be in the bigger session room across Capital Factory. Don't forget to validate your parking if you haven't done so, or call check your Uber or Lyft app so you can get home. Let's see. We also, at the end of these sessions, we have an NPS survey, Net Promoter Score, and you'll be able to go to, matter of fact, I should write it up here on the board rather than tell you the whole link. So if you go there, you can tell us about how you enjoyed or didn't enjoy the session, and give any feedback you like. Prabhakar?
Hard to read. Can I just read it out? It's bit.ly, bit.ly/NPS Product Austin. So we will appreciate if you can take the survey. It's just one question, really.
Is this on the Meetup page or anything?
We're going to send an email.
Okay.
So after this is all done, we're going to do the award now of the book, but feel free to stick around and network with other folks. We have, this group has been growing every month, and it's really an amazing turnout, and there's a lot of people here that I don't know, so I'm going to look forward to meeting some of you that I don't already know. John, have you had a chance to decide who's going to get the
This is rough. Well, I enjoyed the chutzpah from the guy who was talking only in the hypotheticals.
Getting fired anyway.
Yeah, right. You might as well have
So can you hook up with Prabhakar, and he'll make sure you get a copy of the book. He doesn't have it. We don't have a copy with us right now. All right. Thank you, everybody.